Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Visual Studio Toolbox. I'm your host, Leslie Richardson, and I'm excited because we're about to kick off a mini series, the first of the year, that's all about extensibility, and specifically the brand new out of proc Visual Studio Extensibility model, Visual Studio Extensibility. That's just a bit of a mouthful, but really excited to talk about it. And joining me is Tina Schrepfer, who's the engineering lead on the extensibility team. Hi, Tina.
Hey, Leslie, long time no see.
I know, it's been a minute. I'm really
Yeah.
sad we don't coordinating shirts today, I realized.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
For those who are new to this, every time I have the extensibility team on the show, we always manage to coordinate outfits and it's completely unintentional.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we were having a meeting about this last week and we were also coordinating colors. It's
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah. We all showed up in orange.
Yeah, it was pretty great. I was like
Yeah.
kind of manifesting blue subconsciously today, but couldn't quite get there. That's okay.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, it was it was like, I guess a year and a half ago since we last talked about
Yeah. I feel like it's
extensibility.
almost like maybe 2. Yeah, 2 years. Yeah.
Jeez, time flies.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
yeah, I imagine a lot has changed since then and
Mhm.
a lot has really evolved. Seeing the new model grow up, so to speak, has been really exciting to see. So, this series is going to be all about that, right? Talking about what's new and also talking about it through the samples.
Right. So I think the last few times we met on Toolbox or even Matt's show, right? We were kind of in the beginning of Visual Studio Extensibility. And it was more to get folks familiar with what we're talking about, like get people on board with why the new model is better. But now it's been a few years since we've done this, and we've actually got a lot more stuff built into the new model, to the point where we are now allowing people to upload their extension written in this new model to marketplace. Right. We
Yay.
recently had one that was actually featured on the one of the favorite things that we like about Visual Studio from 2024. I think that was a video that the PM team had, right? And Maya, who's the PM for accessibility now, she demoed being able to hot load extensions or Visual Studio extensibility
Oh, yeah.
extensions, and yeah. And there was an extension that she showed off, which called I think it's called Bright XAML. But that was written using the new model, and you can now install it without the need to restart Visual Studio. And we just got a lot more content available in the APIs now that I think it's prime time for us to do another one of these series to get people more comfortable with writing extensions through the new model using the samples that we have.
Cool. Yeah, I remember seeing that hot, what do you call it? I mixed up
Hot
with hot
load.
reload.
It's
Hot load.
yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
Well, we have to come up with a better terminology because I feel like I always get it mixed up with hot reload
Yeah.
printing, right? Yeah.
Don't worry. I mean, I personally have a conflict of interest. I work on hot reload these days, so my brain is like, "Ugh."
Yeah. Yeah.
But I remember seeing that for the first time and I was like, "Oh, that
Right.
was so exciting to see."
Yeah.
But for
Yeah.
the uninitiated, I think we had an old existing extensibility model at one point. So what happened to that? Why are we evolving it to what it is today?
Yeah, so, the old one, right? We're not first of all, we have no plans on deprecating the old model, or what we call the VSSDK model. The majority of our extensions that live in the ecosystem, today are written on the old model, and a lot of extensions have been serving Visual Studio customers for many years, so we have no plans to deprecate that. However, we do recognize that a lot of those, technology paradigms and patterns that were in the old model have become outdated. And they've also, like, even if it's not outdated, they were never really written in a cohesive way that was easy for people to pick up, right? They were kind of written um, for our internal engineering teams to enable a new feature to have a show up in Visual Studio, right? So a lot of times it for a new extender who was not super familiar with Visual Studio, it's really hard to pick up and to feel like you're actually making progress when writing extensions. So that's kind of one of the driving forces why we came up with a new model is just the ease of use, right? Because the current one it's just not the VSSDK model, it's just not easy to use.
Mm.
And then the second one is just isolation. The fact that the extension is written in VSSDK today they load in the same process of as dev end. Like, so any, bugs you might have, any mistakes you might make, it could negatively impact Visual Studio customers, right? It could cause it to crash, it could cause it to hang. So with the new extensibility model, because it's run outside of the main process, right? If it crashes, if it hangs, all it affects is that extension's functionality, right? Or extension functionality in general.
Yeah.
It doesn't impact the whole platform. So those are the kind of two main reasons why we came up with the new model.
Mm, that's really exciting, and I think that's such a commendable effort to do because obviously you had to rebuild kind of from the ground up in a lot of ways, and yeah, the ease of use, even just seeing it in its early days state like a year ago
Yeah.
was just it felt like night and day between the old model and the new
Right.
one, so,
Right.
like,
Right.
I'm excited to see how it's evolved even more,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and yeah, just ultimately making extension writers a lot more productive, not having to go through some of those cons that can come with the old one, so,
Yeah. Exactly.
good stuff. And, now that we've swapped over to what is now being called Visual Studio Extensibility,
Mhm.
uh, where does the VS SDK fit in all this at the end of the day?
I think for, bigger extensions, or especially if you have an extension that you've already written using the SDK, I don't think it's going to be I don't think um, it's to be expected that you can just make the jump from VS SDK over to Visual Studio Extensibility, right? I think it has
Mm,
to be a migration process. And a lot of it has to do with like what APIs do you need for your extensions and what APIs are available in Visual Studio Extensibility. Our hope is that you will try, right? Like if there's a new API available in the extension that you're already using, you will try to migrate, pieces over to the new model while keeping the ones that are not supported on the current model. So we have this thing called uh, VSSDK plus Visual Studio Extensibility when you write an extension. What it means is that you can use the old and the new, and we load your extension in the same process as Debian, so you can have access to both. But really, we want you to try out the new APIs. We want you to give us feedback. And for us, one of the things that we're doing is like we don't like we want to keep people engaged in the new API. So one of the things that we're doing is whenever new features come out, right? Whenever there are new extensibility points that we want to expose, we only want to expose it in the new model, right? So you can take advantage of a lot of the modern stuff that we're doing in the new model. So for example, I think Debug Visualizer, it was one of the first APIs that we've introduced in Visual Studio Extensibility, and that's only available in the new model, right? We don't have a VS SDK equivalent to do that. But yeah, you could totally mix and match, right? We understand that it's an integration process. But if you're a new extender, right, I would say, try not to look at VS SDK. Just try to focus on Visual Studio Extensibility, because I think you'll find it a lot easier to understand, a lot easier to build. And I think if you don't need the functionality for your extension, then why bother looking at both models?
cool. So, because this is a mini series, we are gonna explore Visual Studio Extensibility in a lot more detail, so
Yeah.
can you give a little tease about what's to come?
Yeah, so, we've done a mini series. I think that was the 2 years ago, that was the mini series that we did,
I think
right?
it
And
yep.
that
Mm,
yeah, 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 and I think that was sort of like what we had then, right? We introduced you to commands, we introduced you to debug visualizers and remote UI, but it's not a complete set because we're always evolving. So for this one, what we wanna do is we actually wanna focus on, teaching you how to write extensions through the samples that we provide. So the idea is that we would have a lot of these episodes, and each episode focus on one sample that we have in our GitHub repo. And through talking through these samples, you will learn more about the concepts in Visual Studio with that extensibility. So it doesn't feel like we're just rehashing what we wrote on documentation, right? I think its intent is really to be more interactive,
mm.
and for you as a new developer to be able to consume these knowledge in kind of bite-sized pieces. And the neat thing about this is that I try to get as many of our engineers to come on the show as possible. So you can actually, get to know the engineers behind the scenes working on these APIs and these features, and I think that's pretty neat.
I agree, I think it's super cool. We don't have enough engineers on here, like, we need to have them on the show all the time, seriously. It's cool to get behind the scenes takes on the stuff that they're working on. And yeah, I'm excited to see what you and the team have been up to in that span of time because a lot has changed. So, for people who want to start taking a look at all of these samples and even maybe start writing their own extensions, I think we are going to put a link in the uh, description below with
Yeah.
the correlating repository, right? So,
Yeah, 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 yeah. And these episodes, like this is a mini series, but we don't really have an end date, right? Because we're constantly updating, refreshing the samples, creating new ones when new APIs become available. So I think for the first few episodes, you'll see like we're trying to make up for all the samples that we already have. But as time moves on, you might see us rehash some of the existing samples, right? So for example, if we start to fill the gaps with commands, right, we might come back to the command sample and say like, hey, these are new things that we've added. We'll just have new samples to show because we have new APIs available now.
so exciting.
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, we're not going to waste any time. So, we're going to hop on over into part one and
Yeah.
explore the first of our mini samples. So, Tina, thank you so much for introducing the series. And I'm excited to see in depth what's going on with BS extensibility.
All right. Well, thank you, Leslie.
All right. Thanks, y'all. See you in the next one.